Hi everybody, how's it going? Happy Tuesday morning, or wherever it is where you may be. So it's me, Jen, on channel again. We're going to be streaming some coding today, mostly JavaScript, Node.js-y stuff, and I'm going to switch over to the real view so we can take a look at what we're going to be doing today. Let me make that bigger so you can see all better and stuff. So we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Last week we were doing kind of a meta session where we were playing around with the Twitch API, specifically for me to learn more about the behavior of when people live code on stream and when people watch people live code on stream, so that I can help plan, so I can reach more people on stream. We'll go with that. And we implemented that using Java Cloud Functions, and we're eventually going to feed that into a Google Sheet. So we actually kind of stopped off at the point where something was working. We had two different implementations that were half working, and we left them running, but they had some pretty significant issues with them. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check in with them to see how they're doing. So let's make a new to-do list. So this is a to-do list for like last week. So that was what? That was like, see, October 24th. So that would be 17th. So we're going to make a new to-do list. For today. For the 24th. So what we're going to do is we're going to recap what we have. Specifically, we're going to take a look at the data we collected with our kind of like not as awesome scripts. We have collected with previous incarnations, previous versions. And we have two different versions to look at there. We have both the shell one-liner and we have the JavaScript version. Both of them were pretty brittle, so I'm actually curious to see how much data they were able to collect over the last week. I bet they were able to get, my gut says, they were able to get samples for about 50–60% of the time, which is, hey, more than zero, but that's not real software. So we already moved stuff to source control. We're going to port over JavaScript. We started doing that. So the things that are left, we want to do these three things that we didn't do last time. We want to port the data over to a Google Sheet. We'll probably do that last. We have some cleanup to do now. I'll actually duplicate this. So what do we want to clean up first? Clean up. Or we can call this refactoring. So I found some code that I apparently coded in Poland and completely forgot about 2 weeks ago. Which is funny, which means I should probably watch my videos before I stream, because I'll remember code I wrote. Probably because of my poor source control hygiene. Anyway, that had some solutions to some of the bugs we have now in the current running implementation. So we should probably merge together the best of both JavaScript Cloud Functions programs. Yeah, the Python version I thought I had written in Poland was actually something I wrote while tinkering around with the API another time. There's no code of me coding that on stream, which is good because that was a disaster. So then we want to do a real cron-like thing, because right now our software is just has a virtual machine running regular old cron that's using curl to run our cloud function. So let's take a look at the functions-cron from the Firebase team has released. Then we'll push data into Google Sheets, and then we will do more refactoring and cleanup. Notably missing from here is tests and stuff like that, because this is not a program I need running long term. Although it would be a good opportunity to kind of dig in on the testing in JavaScript, which I have not done as much. Most of the JavaScript I wrote was back in the day when we didn't test that because we were crazy. So let's take a look at recap what we have. So first, let's recap the data. Oh yeah, we already have data there. Then we want to kind of take a look at the code we have. View the code. So let's go take a look at the data. Boop. So I'm going to open up a new web browser up here. And we're going to go, so there are two different places that the data is getting dumped. We have some console.cloud.google.com. We have some that's running on a virtual machine. So let's go over to that. I think I'm running it in the old Githiator project I used for Cloud Functions, or rather for Cloud Spin, because I hadn't set up like billing properly on that other project. But anyway, we're going to go over to VM instances. We have our Twitch tracker VM, which I didn't actually need to click into, but we can see that it's kind of putting away. And it apparently ran just fine on our micro instance. The CPU utilization is quite low, which is nice because these are actually pretty cheap to run. They cost like under $5 a month to keep running, which is a great deal. And I think running one of them, if I remember right, is still under the free tier. So what was our script? Here's the cron tab we were running. Oh yeah, off camera what I did is I used this VM to poke the cloud function. That was not, I don't know if that made it into the stream, but that's how I kind of triggered it. But the version we brought on this machine originally was twitchtracker.shell, which, let's take a look at it. Cat. We have it in the aptly named yay directory, because I was too lazy to copy keys over to this machine correctly. And let's open that up in Vim. Hey, we get syntax highlighting. That looks so much better. So let's see, where is it actually outputting data to? It's outputting data to in my home directory, data.csv, a peer of this script. Like it's a sibling in the system. And yes, it is a nightmare of two one-liners, and it has all sorts of security problems and all that kind of stuff. Especially because I run it from cron, which means it's running as a, if I remember right, it's running as a privileged user. Yeah, this is kind of a problem. I should probably nuke this VM and not too long because it's so vulnerable because of the way I've designed the script and the way I'm running it. But let's see if we got data. Hey, we got a bunch of data. And this script has an interesting side effect of its implementation, which is whenever it can't get data, probably because the programming community isn't on page 2, which it kind of assumes right now, or that mysteriously evergreen cursor token, that paging token, stops working temporarily, it stops getting data. So this either means that there are way fewer streamers, way more streamers, or just something else completely different went wrong. But we still got a good number of samples. Let's see, how many is that? So we have a total of 147 lines, and 85 of them have no data. So that is, if I remember how to do arithmetic on something like this. Otherwise, we'll just do it in Python. So if we got, so the number we actually got is 147 minus 85 divided by 147. Because it's doing integer stuff, isn't it? Oh, Python. Sometimes I remember how to program in U. Let's close that parenthesis. So we have 62. 62 divided by 147. Because, how do you actually do floating point arithmetic in Python? Oh, it's because this is probably Python 2. Yeah. So you actually have to do explicit cast. Well, rather than do that, we'll just run Python 3. That solves the problem, doesn't it? Then we can run our original expression. I forgot there was more than one Python. I forget that a lot. So we got 42.2% of the data with our script, which is pretty bad in terms of accuracy as software goes. So we need something better. So how about the Cloud Function version? I would expect, so my hypothesis is that because it is not caused by some weird error in the implementation, it is actually caused by a it is actually caused by the programming community going between pages 1 and 3, kind of bouncing around, that we should get the same 47 samples. And this would imply that there's a really big hole in my data collection, and there's a very good reason to do it. And this one will take a second to load, because I haven't poked this Firebase in a while. Let's give that another try. There it goes. And this one has, if I just expand all of it out, it only wrote to Firebase when it actually got a valid sample. So this one looks a little bit different. But we can pull that on the command line too and count them. So firebase.io.com/data/.json. Oh, that's right. It's write accessible, but not read accessible right now. So let's go ahead and just open that up all the way to all you troublemakers out there. Make that a little bit bigger for easier reading. So here what I'm doing is I'm removing the security rules so I can tinker around a little bit, which is fun to do while coding, but you should never do when you're coding on live stream or in front of people, because they'll do all sorts of mean things. And it was not under data, it was under stats. There we go. So how do you make Python pretty print? I probably look at the Stack Overflow all the time. There's like a one-liner. Yeah, JSON, Python and JSON tool. Cool, okay, there we get that. And they all begin with -kx. So we'll do, oh no, they all begin with -k. So we will count them by counting the keys. I didn't like that at all. Is it doing like a regular expression there? Yeah, that's what it was doing. So we got 59 samples, which is fewer samples than our shell version. So this one might have other issues with it in addition to the ones we described. Oh, no, wait. It's because I started running it a couple hours later. That's a reasonable explanation. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so they get roughly the same number of samples, which seems to imply that the programming community goes above and below the second page. So we actually have to have a piece of software that doesn't just try and make use of this token, assuming that the programming community is always between 101 and 200 in the popular communities list. We need to actually implement this with proper paging. Great, okay. So, and, well, we actually got a good chunk of data. But I'm not going to bother charting it for now. So I'm going to go lock down that Firebase again, which is something I should probably do on the script, because I just left it writable to the world before. Boop. Actually, I'm going to show you one cool trick on the Firebase REST API first. If I remember right, it still supports shallow reads. Retrieving data. New shallow API. It's going to Google's group thing. Yeah, this is going pretty old school. And shallow equals true. It looks like it might be gone now, though. Okay, so let's take a look, see if it still works. And single get parameter. Hey, that totally worked. Okay, so what that did And we want to do, it was Python. What was the? Someday I'll actually remember this. This is one of those facts where I don't remember the fact, but I remember very quickly how to get to the fact. That's Python division. Python. Pretty JSON. One-liner. Python -m JSON.to. And okay, so what the shallow thing it did is it takes all of the children of the layer that you're looking at, and it just sets them to true. And but just on the response, it's not actually changing the database or anything like that. And this is just another way to I believe this is the only way to see the middle of a real-time database. Like if you want to see the middle of a nested tree, you can use the REST API to do this kind of query. But because of the way the client libraries work, you can't do this from them because in the background they would just sync everything anyway. But yeah, this is just if you have a very deep nested tree and you just need to count the number of entries, this is actually the most efficient way to do it on the client side. If you're trying to limit your server-side load, this is doing a full read on the server side. So this only saves bandwidth. It doesn't, like if you're doing a really nasty query and doing it shallow, you can still make your Firebase server sad. If you manage to construct something completely contrived and insane, and it finds a kind of a sharp corner case in your security rules. Anyway, away from that tangent, which just to review was the shallow equals true parameter, boop, to the Firebase REST API. Let's go back and do we want to plot this stuff right now? Nah, I'm actually just going to go right back into the code and fix the script because I don't think any of you want to see that. But we do have another to-do we want to do as a result of that. We want to actually add, if we're going to be using, well, if we're using a spreadsheet as the write location, we don't need to bother security rules. If we're going to stick with Firebase, which I might actually do because I think it'll satisfy my needs for this project, then I want to, oh, somebody waved hi. Hello. Somebody said hi in chat. Hi. So if we stick with Firebase, real-time database is kind of the data storage. We keep using Firebase, do proper security rules, which is actually one of the very few requests I've gotten from people who watched my videos is they want to see me kind of go through the thinking process on how to build out security rules. And my general advice is to do these as early as possible. But this program is so simple that I'm just going to do them at the end. But if you're building out, your startup on the real-time database, your proof of concept, do the security rules like after the first kind of big cycle. The question is, what is the project? Oh, I can barely because for whatever reason, your name on the chat comes through as the same as the background. Hey, DevXer. So what is my project? So my project today is we are playing around with the Twitch API to take a peek at the number of live coders and live code viewers as it changes over time. We're just checking in once an hour. And then we are passing it off to some JavaScript running in Google Cloud Functions and then feeding it into somewhere we can do some analysis. Probably a Google Sheet, but I might stick with just Firebase real-time database. So you report that you set your chat handle to the background color code on purpose. Why would you do that? You're just trying to make those of us who can't see the contrast sad. Okay, so going on through, let's pick up where we just were. So I guess the next thing we want to do, we've kind of taken a recap of that. Let's take a recap of the JavaScript code we've been hacking on recently. So back to my terminal. And maybe I'll just code in VI today. So we want to go to code. No, we don't want to go to temp. Oh, it's in my snippets repo. Yeah. So let's drag that all bigger and stuff. So the text is a little bit bigger for easier seeing on the internets. And we're going to go, we have our crude shell script there. We have that weird Python thing I tinkered around with a long time ago. And then we have a couple of different functions. WinStream is the one that I recently just recovered. I just found it elsewhere in my file system. And it even has a license header and stuff. And this one is the one I wrote when I was in Poland. And it actually iterates through the different response bodies properly, looks for the programming community. And if it doesn't find programming maybe, if it's undefined, it'll go back and it'll check another one. And then it will dump out the JSON, which is actually something we probably want to add, because our other one that we wrote last week is already living in a cloud function, and it's called Twitch Tracker, and it looks surprisingly similar, except it does completely different things. This one, I kind of solved it from the other side, where I just assumed that it was on. We discovered that these paging tokens, these cursors, are not really cursors, although I guess they're leaving themselves open to implementing proper cursors later for scalability. They're evergreen, so like this token's like months old and it still works, which is crazy. So you can use this to just get to, you can save these tokens to get to any arbitrary page, but that's not part of their API service, so it could break at any time. But what this one does is, assuming it found the right page, it will go through and parse out the viewers and the channels, log it out, and is that all it does? So where is it writing it back to the real-time database? So it's all it does is logging it out right now, which means it's weird because I have one that's running, that's writing back to the real-time database. Where did I put that? Let's take a look around. So there's, oh, it's an index.js. There we go. So this is the version I actually finished. So I should get rid of that red herring. This one actually does write it back to the Firebase real-time database. So it's the same as the previous one. It sends a response out, oh, and then it pushes it. Got it. Okay, so response.send. So this is sending it, oh, this is the response, the other REST object, which corresponds to the response of the cloud function execution, not the response of the getter. So this is sending it out, and it's just piping it out to the output. So if I just run this cloud function, it will just tell me what the current Twitch streaming situation looks. So let's verify that that still works. So we're going to go over back to Cloud Functions. We're going to get the URI for this one. And let's see it run. That text is super tiny for you, but I can just take a peek at it here. And I'm just going to send it a GET request. It will run. And spinning up an instance in the background to do all its stuff. So the first execution that runs every once in a while can take a couple seconds. Take a peek at logs. Yeah, so it was taking, oh, there is a bug in my function because it is surprisingly taking the maximum execution time. That is fishy. That implies to me that I've done something wrong with this. Like, I have a promise that's just hanging out there. So there's a bug in this function right now. So we should probably fix that first. So let's go back to our to-do list. Boop. Figure out why the current implementation. Figure out why current version runs for 60 seconds. So why is it running for 60 seconds? Error could not handle the request. And it's funny that it broke just a few hours ago. Interesting. Oh, and there's a bunch of these 60-second execution. Could that be because that programming community is not on the first page, which is probably resulting in an unhandled error dripping down or something like that? I think that might be the case. So, well, let's just pull that URL and see what it looks like right now. So if I go back to, not that VM, we're going to close that for now. Goodbye, VM. Bye. We're going to go back to this version, and we're just going to curl the Twitch API. with these headers. So curl -h, and we want to set an accept header. Accept, so this will tell Twitch that we are using the version 5 API. And we'll set another header, which gives it my client ID. And then we will give it the URI, which does have an ampersand in it, so we need to put it in single quotes or the shell will escape it and our request will not run. So we run that, and we want to pipe it to json.tool, so we get pretty Python. Hey, pretty Python. And then we want to grep for programming, and it's not there. This is interesting. Where is programming today? Is it on the first page? So if we get rid of the cursor, we'll get the first page. Interesting. So it's on the third page now. So programming is less popular than usual at the moment. So let's, instead of grepping for programming here, let's grep for a cursor. And we got MJAW is our new cursor. So let's go back and take a look at page 3. Hey, there's programming. Let's add some context. -C3 -C3. Hey, there, it didn't blow up in a fireball. So there are currently 34 channels and 265 viewers for the programming community, and it is not on our assumption of page 2 of the API, it's on page 3 of the API. And when we hit that case, our cloud function blows up in a fireball disaster in an interesting way. So what happens is it's just running forever because there's some promise just continuing to run, or we have some other weird return condition. So let's take a look at the function implementation and see where we might have gone wrong in our implementation, and just try and fixing that now, because we are in a perfect opportunity that our bug is being manifested now. So if there is no error, so I don't think there's an error because I can do that request. Else, something went really wrong, error. So how do I just kind of return promise.done? So what I want to do is okay. So why does it work when the request is actually running? Is that because we're never returning anything, which to me seems to imply that this should always run forever. Because at the end of my execution, I always need to return a promise, because we're in a promiseified version of this thing of Cloud Functions. So let's go take a look at the docs. So we're going to look for Cloud Functions for Firebase, and we want to see how we should get it. Oh, and then there's a local runtime for debugging these things. We should probably switch to instead of just deploying it. But we'll just go straight to deploy. So Cloud Function triggers. We want to, because this is a pretty basic thing, we just want to make sure that the function cleanly exits. This is how you trigger them. But what about the function themselves? Writing functions. Let's just look at the getting started section, which is a useful exercise in many cases. Even if I kind of know something, I usually learn something from this. And I'm hoping to find a quick answer to what I need to do to get this to. Is it because I'm not writing anything to the response? That might be the reason it hangs. Am I not writing anything to the response? Let's go back to, so I'm going to drag this off screen. I'm going to go back to here. And yeah, we're not writing anything to the response. I think that is the difference between these. So when things work, oh, this is the version, the pull-in. This is the code that pages through. Here's our actual execution. So one of the differences is that when I successfully get something, I actually write something to the response. When things go wrong, I don't write anything to the response, and that might actually change the way it executes a little bit. So that's for the case of errors. for the case that I never found anything else, let's just write gibberish to the response. Like, I'm done. Or my favorite like piece of, so what does this correspond to? This corresponds to the request. Okay, so we're gonna do it outside of here. So we're just gonna write a couple things to the response, and we're going to see if that will cause our function to actually exit. Thanks for playing Wing Commander. Like an old school classic gaming inside joke. So if you've never seen the story behind the thanks for playing Wing Commander, that's a really funny CS history story. Okay, so is it still on page 3? It is still on page 3. We can still verify our thing. So let's go ahead and let's deploy our cloud function. There we go. Let me get that above my little camera cutout so you can actually see what I'm typing. So we're deploying cloud functions now. And this might take a moment. So in the meantime, I'm going to go look at running functions locally. So you can run functions locally to test them before deploying to production. This is super useful for keeping kind of a tight development cycle, because otherwise you have to deploy every time you make a change. So the Firebase CLI command emulates the HTTPS functions. Awesome. And you can also use Cloud Function Shell, which is a more recent addition to the SDK, which is awesome. So we don't really care about serving them as HTTPS. And using the function shell, this allows you to trigger like database triggered functions and stuff like that. But we just have HTTP functions, so we can probably just get by with a simple Firebase serve. So once this deployment is done, hey, it's done. Okay, so why run it on the tester when we can just run it in production? So let's go take a look at this again. curl-v without me accidentally pressing enter. And hey, it actually exits now. So it turns out that writing to the response buffer at all will cause the cloud function to terminate when all of the JavaScript inside finishes running. Okay, there's probably a better way to implement that, but that certainly seems to do the trick. So that's a little bit less of a disaster. At least it doesn't hang for 60 seconds now. Because when your function hangs for 60 seconds, you have to pay for all that runtime. Because it is indeed billed then. So lesson learned. I just spilled a little coffee on my keyboard. I will be right back. I'm going to go grab a paper towel. Hello again. Yeah, the demo effect definitely does apply when you're on stream as well. If something can go wrong, it will. I just spilled some coffee on my keyboard. We'll see if it starts acting funny. I think it'll be fine though. I think I got all of it out of there. It was just a drop of coffee, but that can really make keyboard sad. And okay, so where were we? We deployed the function. It ran kinda, but all it does is tell us essentially our I'm done message, which we should replace with something proper. So let's go back to, let's merge together the two versions we have. So we have this version, boop. I'll kind of do a split screen thing with two different VI buffers. And then we have the Poland code version, which is over here. And they implement different parts of the flow we want. So we need to kind of squish them together. So the code I wrote in Poland, what it does really well is it pages through the pages and finds the page with programming on it. And then it returns, what is it returning here? So it's returning, oh, the find command for the community. Oh, wow. I use like underscore and like proper JavaScript stuff. So let's slurp in these. Oh, and I even took the client ID and moved it into a config object. Wow. I like did smart things. But we're just going to get the promiseified request library. Oh, we're using a different request library in this one. How annoying. So promiseified request, we'll just promiseify this function while we go, because what could go wrong? Nah, I will do them, I will get them working one at a time. I wonder if I can have request promise and this, or if they're going to have some kind of namespace collision problem. Anyway, we will find out. Then we have this wonderful function, fetch and check, and it returns the object that corresponds to that, and it has proper error handling. Wow, I wrote really... What's funny is this is the only time I streamed with alcohol in my hand, and it's actually much better software than when I have coffee in my hand. So either I should be streaming in the evening, or I should be streaming with a beer in my hand each time. So there's our function, fetch and check. And then that's gonna, at the very bottom, it's gonna return the programming community, or it's gonna cease execution. Do I have that outside my function? Yeah. And this one corresponds to the cloud function. Okay, so this should be fine. So what we want to do is we want to run fetch and check. So if there is no cursor, request config cursor equals cursor. Where does that cursor come from on the other implementation? The initial cursor comes from, oops, lost my window. The initial cursor that gets passed in, how am I actually running it? Oh, here it is. Oh, and then I'm just logging it out. Okay, so fetch and check. If I pass in no cursor, it just goes through and finds the first cursor. Otherwise, it calls itself with a new cursor. Only add cursor if one has been passed in. Otherwise, it doesn't add a cursor to the request. Hey, actually, this is less terrible code than I usually write. So let's go get the execution of it. Boop. So what we want to do here is we drag my Vim buffer onto my actual screen. So what we want to do here is our cloud function. The first thing it should do is, well, we need the date timestamp. Then we're going to want to start paging through. So we're going to put it in here. So the first thing we're going to do is page through and find the programming page. Find the programming community. And it has the parameterized, in addition to the cursor, it also has the parameterized client ID, which I can just add as a parameter. Yeah. Or I can make it global. I'll add it as a parameter. So then that returns that. Nah, I'll make it global. Okay, so cursor, so it's looking for fetch and check response.cursor, community's name programming. I'll just hard code it for now. Because why do things right when you can do them working for now? So we're going to go ahead, copy our client ID back down. This is probably as interesting as watching me backport changes across multiple branches. So, but it will get us closer to our solution. So fetch and check. Then once we've done that, we don't want to log it out. What we want to do, so fetch and check will fetch until it finds a programming community. If it never finds it, I think it's just going to page on forever. So we should probably add some level of depth checking to that so it doesn't just keep on paging. It assumes there is a community called programming in that API somewhere. So I should probably add something to keep it from recursing forever. And I guess, I don't know how deep the stack can go in JavaScript. To do, make sure it does not page forever. Like have some like max depth 5 pages. Also, I should make it handle the case. Deal with not having, I wonder what happens when you have no more communities. Deal with end of community list. Do you stop getting a token? Because if mine does that, I think it'll keep recursing forever then. The downside of recursive programming, it is easy for things to kind of go forever. So, okay, so we fetched and checked. We have programming JSON. Then let's just take that and let's write it out to let's just write it out to the response for now. So, oh wait, we have all this stuff too. So we want to get this out. So let's go ahead and write that back to, how many lines is that? That's okay, so we want to get out to the viewers and the channels, which is going to be boop, programming JSON. Okay, then we have our timestamp, which we'll write out to the response. We have our stats.ref, so that's actually going to push it to the Firebase. And let's just comment this all out for now. I think this should just work. I'll use block comments. So request, do all those things. So let's see if this runs. And let's do the local runtime environment for it that we discovered. So boop, bring up my terminal again. And we're going to run the local runtime environment, which is Firebase serve only functions. You can also do hosting, which is cool. So I need to update my tools. This is a day when basically everything out there complained to me that it needs an update. I think I installed like 3 rounds of updates before I started. So no HTTPS functions emulated because this one has an unexpected token. So that means I have an extra paren somewhere that's causing problems. This is the unfortunate part of the day where I think it's about 90 degrees where I'm sitting right now. So my coding is going to start to as my brain overheats. So I might actually open this up in a real IDE so I can get proper matching. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We'll knock up our tools a notch. So we're going to bring up IntelliJ. We're going to create a new project. We'll do static web. I think that gets kind of the basic behavior. We want to point it to our existing sources, which is, of course, these are not in, they're like in date modified order. We'll just open this directory, create a new project. We'll do its dance. And then, hey, we get a real IDE with real features. Like the ability for me to do single key code folding and all that stuff. So let's go back to functions. We wanted to get rid of some of these. This one actually didn't do anything. So once IntelliJ catches up and we can do a refactor, we'll go ahead and delete this one because that's code we don't need anymore. Make this bigger for easier reading on the internet. And then tell me where I've broken everything. Well, first of all, I'm going to switch these to not block comments. Oops. There we go. Using proper line comments. And then what is going on here? So code Cool. Okay, so code actually like auto-format the code. For some reason, my hotkey for that is not working today. And let definitions are not supported by current JavaScript version. So let's go into preferences and tell it what version of JavaScript we're using. Or is that project settings? I think it's in project settings. So we're going to open module settings. And somewhere in here, I can tell it what version of JavaScript I'm using. That's Java version. Where do I tell it what JavaScript version I'm using? Well, let's go ask the internet. IntelliJ, change JavaScript version. So preferences, library frameworks, JavaScript. So preferences, libraries and frameworks, languages and frameworks, JavaScript. We are not using 5.1. We're coding at ECMAScript 6. Because we're coding like it's 2016. Yay! Some of the red squiggles went away. But what else have I done as I pasted code into each other? The hotkey works when I do it on my laptop keyboard, just not on my actual keyboard. So what a terrible thing have I done here? So let's do fold some of these up. So our config is pretty straightforward. Cursor is straightforward. So if cursor, return this, and then this is the end of this chain. So why does it not like that? So it says, static analysis says missing closing curly brace? Really? That's all it needed? And then what's up here? It says, I'm unexpected. Why are you unexpected? Did I close this out up here? Oh, I did. Okay. So this is just hanging out doing nothing but causing trouble. So we'll comment that out too. Okay. So now that our code is actually well formed, it may actually run. Invalid left-hand side in assignment. Hey, we get a line number though of what we've done terribly wrong. There's an extra, I bet there's a space there that should not be there on line 33. So we go up to line 33, and indeed, our arrow function is not an arrow function. It has a space in it. I don't know how that got in there. There we go, and now it says unexpected end of input, which means that we're still missing. We have some terrible, poorly formed code. I feel like I'm a CS student in my CS 101 class all over again. And so function cursor, why are you grumpy? Where does this curly brace corresponds to this one? This one corresponds to this one. That one's already closed. This one corresponds to that one. So why are you grumpy? Is there another? Oh, I never closed this out. Okay. And this function, I just want it below there. I don't want it running inside. Let's run my code formatting on that one. So now, let's collapse this giant block of comments. This actually terminates there. This function actually ends, which allows me to write this function, which also actually ends. So let's refold all of our code. This one actually ends, and it's a different, it's not an arrow function. It's just a regular boring function. So now is our code well formed. Parsing errors, cannot find module request promise. So functions, we need to install all of our stuff. We need Lodash request promise. Oh, this is done now. We don't need regular request. So we'll install request promise, and we'll install Lodash. And let's see if it runs now. And the Firebase serve for HTTP functions already saved us tons of time, because before I would have been in like a deploy loop, which would have made me feel quite busy, but I would have been pretty unproductive. So let's take a look at this. We've been testing this with curl, so let's change this back to the blue profile. There we go. And let me make that a little bigger for easier seeing. Curl-v. And hey, it ran, and it gives us the information we need. Does it also write it to the Firebase? Let's check it out, because even the local version should still be able to write to Firebase, especially because our security rules are just open right now. So let's go ahead and do it. Do I have a window open for that? Not yet. So let's open a new window, go to console.firebase.google.com. Go take a look at our Twitch tracker project. Look at the real-time database. Give it a moment to load. I don't know why that's acting funny these days. Usually it just comes right up. But anyway, if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see our new data that was just written there. You can tell it's written by me manually because it doesn't end at an even hour. And it was about a minute ago. And if I run it again, another one appears. So it's totally working. Okay, well that's better than our current implementation. So let's go ahead and deploy that. No, let's not deploy it. Let's keep working and making it better. So let's clean up a bunch of the other cruft we don't need anymore. We have this config object that has all of our Firebase config. It should probably be a constant. And let's rename that since we actually have proper refactoring. Firebase config. We're going to run, so we run fetch and check. None of this code does anything anymore. What all is in there? Do we need any of that? Or should I just rip it all out? And so this is a prompt. So fetch and check, does that always return a promise? It always, and it returns a promise or the answer. So it either returns this or then, okay, then it finally does a catch at the bottom. Something bad happened, which will get reported to the console. So that means that this, what does it return when it has an error? I actually don't know what promises do in that case. This is one of the reasons like I'm still, like I've spent quite a while trying to kind of wrap my head around promises, and I feel it makes me, they make me feel silly. Did I misspell communities? Unresolved variable communities. Oh no, because this is poking into it. Okay. So, what else do I want to add here? Let's go back to our to-do list, why not? So to-do list, we did the recap. Let's change these to stars so I know they're done. We figured out why the current version ran for 60 seconds, because in the case where programming wasn't on the second page, it just ran forever. Then we did some refactoring. We merged together both implementations. So, and we have some outstanding issues, which I guess we could continue to clean up, which is the make sure it doesn't page forever. Let's do like a max depth of 5 pages. Sure, let's do that. And what's a good way to do that? How does a function know how deeply it's paged in? By keep using a global variable to keep state? Ugh, that sounds pretty ugly. Let's do that. How deep pages, page depth. So we have page depth, which is, which makes me sad having this out here, but I can't think of a better way to implement this other than having global mutable state. I guess I could just pass a counter in each time. Yeah, we'll do that. Because the cursor, if the cursor encoded the depth, we could just get it from there, but we can just add it as another argument too. So if cursor request config cursor, if so, let's open up Node and see how this behaves. I know Node has weird behaviors for this kind of equality. So what do I have to check to see if that's undefined? So I guess I can just check to see if it's undefined. So if, so what happens if I run this with no argument coming in? So actually this should just give me a Boolean, so I don't need an if statement on this. Boop. Page depth is not defined. So if I have a function and I have an argument that's not specified, like this, so what will page depth be? If page depth is undefined, so dot log, yay. Else, dot log, nay. Proof I don't really know JavaScript. Boop. Okay. Fetch and check 0, 0, I should get a nay. What if I just don't specify that? I get a yay. Okay. So a variable that's not passed in as an argument will be undefined. So if page depth is undefined, which I think is a safe way to check it. I'll find out when I tinker around more. And this is when like experience with languages actually becomes useful. You get through these kinds of situations much more fluid. Like what happens if a value isn't passed in? What is that set to? Apparently undefined. So it's defined, but it's defined and initialized to the value undefined because JavaScript. So if I don't have a page depth, I'm going to set I'm going to assume I'm at page 0. No value passed in. Assume I just started. Started at page 0. And that means whenever I recurse, I want to count my pages as I go down. And now I need to add a short circuit to bail if my page depth gets too deep. Let's just hard code it. And so what do I want to do if this actually happens? I guess I should throw an exception or whatever the JavaScript equivalent is. I think there are errors in JavaScript. Throw, where you just throw an expression. Throw true. Generates an exception with the value true. Generates an exception with a string value. So if I want to crash this guy out, what do I do? So probably just throw an exception with a numeric value. What do you actually want to do in most useful cases? You probably want to throw a string exception. If page depth is greater than, let's use parentheses because we're programming in JavaScript. Page depth is greater than max page depth. Throw page no programming after. I want to use backticks though because I want to use fancy template strings. There we go. How many pages? So we are going to be depth limit is max page depth. So let's set this down to 0, and this should just bail. Oh, but they're not defined yet. Okay, so we want to move this up here. So we want to set up our paging. Okay, so deal with paging down too far. So let's go ahead and so now we can use Firebase serve, which is still running over there, isn't it? Yeah, I never stopped it. So we'll serve this function, which will do all of our handy dandy compile time is checking. We can run this. curl-v. We run our function. And apparently just throwing that did not cause it to exit. So is that because it's catching it somewhere then? But I would expect it to log it out, because this could be further down the stack, which is not the situation we have right now. Because the thing is, I'm taking the response from that and the next page. So this one hangs. So let's just throw this right at the top and see what happens. Internal function crashed. Socket hung up. Yes, I know it hung up. Oh, this should be out here. Okay. So I got a sig term crash. Something bad happened. User function trigger, starting execution, something bad happened. No program computing after 1, a limit is 0, and then it just hung. Which is because this one should probably get returned. Okay, so I unintentionally tested, because what's actually happening here is because I set my max page depth to 0, and I don't stop until I'm greater than the max page depth, which is what we just ran, it didn't trigger on the first fetch and check. So it didn't get dropped out on this one. What it did is it happened further down the stack on this execution on the first recursion. So now, I think I fixed it by just returning. So I think that I didn't. The problem is the error ended up getting caught by this error handler and then not propagated back out. So I should probably just throw my error all the way to the console. Maybe that'll fix it. So let's restart it again, because I'm swallowing my error, you know, like in Java catch throwable. No, why is it broken? So we're starting it up again, and we're trying to make sure that the error makes it all the way back out so that the function actually crashes in a timely fashion when things go wrong. Unhandled rejection. No programming. Limit is 0. But the function continues to run. So there's no handled rejection. So does that mean that I need to rethrow it? I would assume it would just kind of go all the way back out. So that eventually stopped. Socket hung up. Let's try just returning it down that chain, because we could be many levels nested by now. This seems like a no-op, but I don't know JavaScript well enough to know if it actually is a no-op. Unhandled rejection. So it's apparently true that I do not know how to deal with error handling in this case. This is a bummer because in just a kind of an iterative style, this would be so easy to write. So we're getting our unhandled rejection, and then it just hangs. Oh, remember if I didn't write to the response, it hung. Let's try that. So, oh, but this doesn't have access to that because that's being called from a different context. Because it's called up here, and this response gets swallowed up here. And return fetch and check if it's successful. So maybe I just need to add an error handler to here. So I can probably get rid of this stuff. Boop. And I can probably come back up here in this chain of promises. So response.send bad stuff. Bad stuff. Stuff. Then let's take a peek at error. So we're going to go back here. We're going to try running it again. Maybe the hang is coming from the wrapping chain of promises. Hey! We actually get our error message out and it stopped executing right away. That's awesome. 261 milliseconds. That's much better. Okay, so that was the problem. Is that the rejection was running in here and I was originally swallowing it here and just printing it out. So I removed that and then it keeps throwing that error further and further up the chain, but I still need to grab the rejection somewhere at the top of the chain. That makes a lot of sense. So no matter what, I need to write something to the response buffer, otherwise it's going to hang. So we still need to figure out how to deal with the end of the community list. Let's go ahead and give that one more kick with a deeper page depth. So let's test both cases. This would be when it would be nice to have actual unit tests. So we're going to assume our max page depth is 5. We're going to run only our functions again. And we're going to hit it with curl. But it hasn't been deployed yet. There we go. And hey, there's our value. And we don't even care what page it's on. It'll just go up to 5 and then it'll bail out and not write anything to Firebase when that happens. So that's a lot better than it was before. And we are at like 11:53, so I'm going to be coding for like another 40 minutes or so. What do we want to finish in that meantime? Well, this for me, I can deal with the end of the community list later if that ever happens. This does not really need to be evergreen code. I mean, it has a hard-coded identifier down here, so it's not like super robust software. So let's deploy it. So first, let's add it to source control. Add package.json index get rm dash dash. So we want to remove the which tracker because we removed it locally. And I think the did I just do not? I didn't do no ops. Okay, so those are all staged now. So let's add them to source control. Code now pages. Oh yeah, I should probably remove the other thing I merged the code in from, which is WinStream. And I also want to modify my getIgnore so that it ignores my IDE cruft. So let's go into getIgnore here. And we want to remove .idea and **iml. Yay, clean commit. Oh, but we have one other thing, which is our package.json has a dependency we don't need anymore, which I've never actually done that in Node. Node remove dependency. Uninstall, not terribly surprising. Exactly what you would expect. So let's go ahead and go into functions. Because we're using the request promiseified version. Oh, but it's needed by a peer anyway. So what does it actually look like in the package.json file? Because I don't need an explicit dependency on request. I just need it on request promise. Because this could also end up someday causing like dependency hell because of like major versions. So I want to get rid of that. So uninstall is probably a little bit too aggressive. What is this prune command? Remove extraneous packages. Let's try npm prune. Did that actually change my... No, it did not. Okay, I'm just going to hack the file. See if it still works. Requires a peer request, but none was installed. So it's like a transitive dependency. Do I need to actually explicitly say it? No, I don't need to say my transitive dependencies. Whatever, I give up. It's not causing that many problems. I'm going to give up for now. Stop fighting my tools, because I've learned a lesson about not fighting dependency managers from many a sad day spent with Maven. So merge. Okay, so the cloud function now pages down to programming community. Yay! Okay, so now we want to deploy it. Only functions. So we're going to deploy that to production land. Give it one last check with the manual test. Cannot find module. Okay, so tinkering around, of course, started to break anything. We'll try deploying it again after following its advice and running npm install. While that is deploying, let's take a look at our to-do list. So I'll leave that up in the top half of my screen. Take this down to the bottom half. So we figured out the current version. We did a little bit of refactoring. Next up is the cron thing. Hey, it's deployed. Okay, so we'll get into the cron thing in a moment, but right now let's do one last check of this, which we can do easily with curl. It runs, it takes a little bit longer because it's the first execution of that one. It writes that there are 34 channels and 314 viewers. It's like the first 3 digits of pi. And we should see that written down here. Hey, it's working better. Cool. So this is still, the same URL still exists for this cloud function, which is great because the cron tab that's running on that VM is going to continue to poke it. But let's see if we can add something that'll be a little bit more durable, which is this functions-cron app engine app. So what is this thing? It is a few months old, and it is an app engine cron with Google Cloud Functions for Firebase. So Google App Engine provides a cron service. Using the service, which is a kind of a reliable, redundant service for scheduling Google Cloud and PubSub for distribution messaging. You can build the application to reliably schedule tasks that can trigger cloud functions. So this comes with an App Engine app that uses the App Engine cron service to relay cron messages to Cloud PubSub topics. And a simple cloud function which triggers hourly. Is this exactly what we need? Or does it have some kind of weird thing I don't really want to rip out? So it's actually listening to a PubSub topic. I don't know if I want to add that complexity to, I don't know if I want to add PubSub, which is like this massively scalable, potentially re-entering version of, it's a PubSub queue that can have retries like can happen. So things can be delivered more than once is one of the compromises for its huge scalability. I don't know if I want to hook this. I don't know if I want to make this silly toy dependent on PubSub, because I could just use an App Engine cron to do the publishing. Instead of publishing through PubSub, let's use, so it's a Java, or it's a Python app. I don't think I want this level of complexity in my app right now, so I'm just gonna kind of sidestep this one for now. If I actually had something that had to be reliable, and I was using PubSub anyway, especially for some other part of the app, I'd probably set this up. But for now, I'll kind of punt this one. I don't think it helps me get closer to the, I don't need 5 nines of reliability for a silly script like this. If my VM crashes and I lose a day of data, that's fine. Because whenever you do an engineering choice, you have to kind of weigh in how much time you're going to spend versus the benefits, because I could be spending that time working on something else. So, cron-like thing, functions-cron, punting. So if we keep using Firebase, do proper security rules. Otherwise, push the data into a spreadsheet. I would love to learn more about writing data to spreadsheets. So let's take a quick peek at this. And if that doesn't work, then I'll spend some time hacking up some security rules and probably switching over to the Firebase Admin SDK so I can just do a simple lockdown or something like that. So let's take a look at the Google Sheets API. Sheets. This is Sheets as a product. I want the developer story behind it. Sheets API, and we get videos and all sorts of cool stuff like that. So if I wanted to write to it from Node, is there a little quick start that will get me moving fast? So I want to go to turn on the API. I want to get some credentials. I want to do an OAuth grant and basically get a refresh token or our credentials. Then I want to then $JSON. Okay, so that's just getting kind of like client secrets. And then I need to install a couple libraries. Then this is the quick start, which we would be using. Let me make it a little bigger. We're going to this particular sample, Sheets read-only scope. If modifying scopes, delete your previously saved credentials. So because we're probably going to we want to write to be able to write to this sheet. Then we pull in the client secret, and then we call authorize with that, which is going to do, I'm assuming it's doing like all the OAuth handling. Oh, here it is. It's not part of a client library. It's implemented right here. So we're going to do that, and it's going to do any of the credential dance it has to do, because it might have to refresh and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to get a new token. So this is all the OAuth dancing. Then more OAuth dancing. And then this is actually finally reading the spreadsheet. So to get this to work, is there a way to restrict access to a single spreadsheet? Which is what I want. I don't want to give this script access to all of my spreadsheets. And it looks like the way the grants work, it is just based on all of my sheets. Let's take a look at the security. This might not be the best fit for what I want to do. So what are the scopes? Reading and writing values. So methods, spreadsheets value collection, reading, writing. So where are the scopes listed? This is one of the first things I'm going to do is I often look at the security model pretty early on when using an API just to see if it matches my behavior. Because like I'm writing something I don't want to trust that this piece of software is actually going to stay secure or reliable. And what I don't want to doing is going out of control and like hurting all of my spreadsheets. So let's go look at key concepts. Reading and writing any aspect of a spreadsheet. Okay, so the spreadsheet values collection. Reading and writing values, updating spreadsheets. Every spreadsheet has an ID. That's cool. That's how we're going to index out to that sheet. But how does the access control actually work? Updating spreadsheets. So these are a bunch of method descriptions, field masks, responses. There's no mention of scopes. Okay, so is there a reference for the API? Pivot tables, reading, writing values. Reference. So we're going to take a quick dive into the reference docs, which usually I don't spend that much time in until I actually know what I'm doing. But I just want to do some sanity checking on it because I suspect that this isn't going to be a good fit for my needs. So spreadsheet.values. Ooh, append. So is there auth scopes? Okay. Requires one of the following OS scopes. Refer more to the auth guide. Hey, that's exactly where I wanted to go. Oh, that's general documentation on identity at Google. So let's just web search. Oh, I don't want to web search for I don't want to go to that URL. I want to search for that scope. There's not a lot written about that scope. Okay, so let's go back to the guides. We're going to go back through the Node.js quick start, which looks like a wonderful quick start, and spreadsheets.read only. So if modifying scopes, delete your previously saved credentials. Okay. So it looks like I need that scope API, but there's not a lot written about it. But as far as I can tell, I can't lock it down to a specific spreadsheet. And I want data level access control. So it looks like sheets are not really intended to be used as a database. Shocking. This is for writing like applications that can work with all your spreadsheets. So I'm not going to use this API just because I don't trust my software that much. So we're going to punt on the spreadsheet thing for now until I'll come up with some other interesting problem I want to solve with spreadsheets. Punting. Due to the way the access control works. So I'll use a real database, like the Realtime database. So now what we want to do is if we're going to keep using Firebase, we want to actually do proper security rules. And this might be as simple as just using the Admin SDK and passing in a credential file. So, because this is like basically what I want to happen is I want to be able to lock this thing down to all of you on the internet, which I'll do right now. I can just do that. And then what I want to do is I want only my program to be able to read it. So this gives me a couple of different options. I can either have my cloud function operate as a privileged administrator, like using the Admin SDK, the equivalent of using the old super key, the old API key. And then I can just lock it down to false. And basically, no other client will have access. No one will have client on the REST API. Oh, Mettervel. Hey, somebody said hi. Hey, Mettervel. How's it going? We're hacking on Firebase right now. So what I can do is if I run that cloud function as a privileged API, then I can just lock down the security rules to all other clients and keep out meddlers, which we can even verify because these rules are already published. So I can verify that this will restrict access to all of you. So we can use REST API to detect that. VPS:// twitchtracker.firebase.com/.json. And it's going to go permission denied. And I can even test like a post, which would be tragic to do on the root of the database. No data supplied, so it's grumpy about that. I'll do a put, which would pretty much wipe out everything up here. I guess I need a capital D. I swear I know curl, kinda. Yay, failed open. Yeah, it actually blows up. Right. Anyway, So, but my data is still intact, so that lockdown works. Okay, so but we want our cloud function to still be able to access it. So that's probably the Firebase Admin SDK. So we'll start how we start all these things with a web search. The Firebase Admin SDK lets you interact with Firebase from privileged environments like my executing cloud functions. And I can do read and write with full admin privileges. This is exactly what I need for this particular case. It also gives me privileged access to a bunch of other stuff, like the ability to verify auth tokens. So I can use this as like an intermediate auth broker or part of an integration with an existing SSO. And there's actually a detailed description of everything you can do from each one, which is pretty slick. But all we need is the real-time database, which works from Java, Python, and the part we care about, Node.js. So for that, we're going to switch over to the Firebase Admin SDK. And then we need to get service account credentials. And then when we initialize it, we just initialize it by pointing to the credentials file. So this seems pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and do that. First, we're going to switch over to the Firebase Admin SDK. So we're going to go back to our program, Firebase-admin. We're going to keep calling it Firebase. Then npm. Going to install it with npm so we can actually run it. Hey, it installed. Now we want to go get our credentials, which we get from a different part of the Firebase console. Let me open that in a new tab so I don't lose my place in the docs. And I will try and do this without leaking out a bunch of stuff to you. So where does it live? So once you've created a Firebase console project and downloaded JSON with your service account credentials. So where do I get the service account credentials? I know how to get there, but it doesn't actually tell me a shortcut. I would love a link in here. Oh, here it is. Alternatively, can be authenticated with a different credential type. For example, if you're running your code from Google Cloud Platform, you can make use of Google Application Default Credentials. That's pretty cool. I bet I can do that from a Cloud Function. So I don't even need to download a file. I can just use the Application Default Credentials. And this will work while I suspect this will make it work while it's deployed in a Cloud Function. Oh wait, here's another one. If you're using Node.js Admin SDK in a Cloud Function, you can automatically initialize the SDK using the functions.config variable. So, oh my gosh, this is a shortcut to a shortcut to a shortcut. Let's use the shortest shortcut. Is there another shortcut that's even shorter? Nope. But we can use a saved OAuth token. There's a whole bunch of ways to authenticate, which is great because flexibility is awesome. Oh, and a warning about minting tokens. Okay, but I think this is actually the best fit for our needs. And it only works in Node, which is great because we're using Node and we don't care about those other languages right now. So let's go ahead and, is this doing the entire initialization? I think it is. So I don't need any of that or that. I think this should just replace it. Okay, so let's see if this works with the serve thing. No, not functions, duh, functions. So here we go. Is it actually going to be able to figure out how to initialize that? And it says, warning, credential implementation provided by initialize app via the credential property failed to fetch a valid Google OAuth access token. So apparently it does not work from the local environment. So there might be a way to get that working, but it's pretty grumpy right now. Let's just try deploying it to production to see if it works. I would hate for my kind of dev environment to be broken, but this is such a nice compact representation. So if this doesn't work, we can roll back a couple layers up this thing to, like, application default credentials won't be available locally unless I set up some other things that I don't want to spend time setting up. So I would roll all the way back to just using a secrets file. So let's take a look and see if it works. So I don't want to look at the local one. I want to look at the deployed version. So curl-v Twitch tracker, or track Twitch. And let's go take a look at our real-time database. Scroll all the way to the bottom. Hey, a little green thing popped up and it wrote to there. So this magic line works great when deployed to production land. Where's the one-line initialization? This one, which is pretty slick. But it doesn't work when we use serve, which is a bummer. So let's actually read that error message that was scrolling past before and see if we can learn anything else about this and see if we can fix it. So it's actually trying over and over and over again to fetch it. And every time it is grumpy. And it's looking for some key file or something it can't find. So let's see if the internet has an answer. So I'm searching for, oops, this, and so I'm going to search for Firebase serve and the error message, and often this will bring up a Stack Overflow, but it did not today. An issue? And oh, here we have a Stack Overflow. So let's take a look at these promising looking results. And nothing about functions that configure at Firebase. So I can set custom variables. That's pretty cool. Is there any way for me to set credentials? Analytics, nothing's mentioned here about that. Okay, so that the main doc's not answering the question. Testing Firebase functions locally. This doesn't mention anything about that, but this is just a general emulator and all that stuff, which got the Firebase shell, the Cloud Function shell, mostly solved that. Which is another option. We can try using the Cloud Functions shell to see if it gets the problem solved. Ooh, long issue. So, no breakpoints in that. Firebase serve. This means operations using have different permissions and real usage. Okay, so there's some discussions about the way the Admin SDK interacts with Firebase serve, but no answers. And this one is, how do you set up a local environment variable using Cloud Functions for Firebase? And that's actually something you can do. You can pipe stuff into runtime config. So I don't know if anyone's really discussed this particular issue yet. So I should probably file it. Once I get an answer, I should probably post it on Stack Overflow for sure. I can catch this error and I can fork around it. I can move back to a different implementation of it, or I can just deal with the fact that the local dev environment is broken. And honestly, I'm kind of at the end of my program on this one. I'm probably not going to develop it a lot further, so I might just let this roll, because I can still hit it directly. And so the function itself is authenticated to the Twitch API. It's just the problem with the Twitch API. It's a problem with the, so I can run this function from anywhere. That's not restricted at all. So my VM can do that. It can execute it and push the data to Firebase. But the Firebase itself is still secure. So if I leave this running, it will not end up empty because some worm posted a 0-byte request body to it. So I think this is secure enough for this particular implementation. I'll still need to keep an eye on the VM that's running it to make sure it does not get totally disastrously hurt. And then I should probably also figure out how to take a peek at these things and dump them into like a spreadsheet so I can do some graphing on it and get an idea of how the relationship between viewers and channels. But that might be an issue for another stream, or maybe no stream at all, because I don't know how interesting that is. So we kind of took so to kind of recap the step we just did, we're going to keep using Firebase. And we did proper security rules in that I just decided that all of my clients were privileged clients, and I kind of sidestepped the entire issue of doing security rules, which is good for this script. At least it's not open to the internet like a lot of Firebase little hacking projects are. And I don't think I have any more refactoring to do right now. So I'm going to, oh yeah, what I have to do is my Firebase security rules are going to get written. Oh, actually, I have no Firebase security rules in here yet. Okay. So normally, like when you do Firebase deploy, it actually deploys a security rules tool, but my Firebase JSON is empty, so it's actually not going to stomp the security rules when I do a deploy, which is fine. So I can ignore that. And I think I might be done with this project. So let's call it a day then. Git status. We changed a couple things, so let's commit the changes. Switch to Firebase Admin SDK, so I could lock down my real-time database. I did it the lazy way. But hey, at least it's locked down. At least it's not sitting there open to the internet. Okay, I'm going to go commit it so all of you out there in viewing land can take a peek at it. And then I think we're pretty much done for the day. Which is funny because my one shot, I hoped to originally get this program done in a single stream. And what ended up happening is it took almost exactly 3 streams, which goes back to one of my rules of thumb, which is when I'm doing an engineering estimation, I come up with whatever estimation I think is actually right, and then before I open my mouth, I multiply it by 3, and that's actually the best technique I found for coming up with actually usable engineering estimates, which is sad that my engineering estimation ability has not gotten any better than that, but it is just how it is. And sometimes you just have to kind of accept things as they are. So the question from Metarevel, I think I'm pronouncing your name right, is you write on Python. So today we didn't write much on Python at all. I had tinkered around with this problem a little bit in Python 3, and I think I spent just a moment doing some arithmetic in a Python shell. But today I wrote almost all JavaScript. But Python is a language I do write sometimes. Last year I taught a university class entirely in Python 3. It's a lot of fun. I like Python a lot. But one of the reasons I'm doing this stream is I want to learn modern JavaScript, which is a lot of fun. So the question is, could I suggest a good JavaScript book for intermediate level? Actually, I can't. I actually I don't learn programming from books very much. I learn most of my software development from trying to build stuff is a big part of it, and then tinkering around on Stack Overflow and sharing code, because there's no better way to get feedback on what you've done wrong than by showing someone else your code. So getting code review from friends and peers, inviting them to hackathons and things like that. And another way I also learn good practices is from watching people code on YouTube, which is one of the reasons that I'm starting to code a lot on Twitch, is I want to share that with more people in the world. I don't know who out there is going to want to see me code, but there might be people who want to see me code, like you're watching. And it's especially useful to watch on YouTube when you can turn it up to 16x with the various Chrome plugins now, which is a very nice way to watch somebody code. It's not as painfully slow. So I'm afraid I have no recommendations for books. I usually just search for a problem I have or a kind of app I'm trying to write, find someone streaming it on YouTube, and then go try and implement it myself to see how it actually works in practice. But thanks so much for watching. So if you have any other questions, I can handle a couple other questions right now since I'm kind of done coding for the day. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up the stream and go back to my regular day job where I do a little bit of coding, but mostly email, it seems. So let me make sure everything is tidy. Boop. Close that out. Close the project. Close that other project viewer. And close my terminal. And then So the question was, do you really work at Google? Yes, I really work at Google. I've worked at Google for a total of 6 years now. For some reason, they continue to pay me. I don't really know what's up. I even got promoted once. And the question is, how must I get there? So if you want to do software engineering at Google, I applied through the website. So actually, I found a friend who referred me in, but really, I didn't know them that well, and they didn't know my work that well. So it was really not a huge advantage over just applying through the website directly. So I found a job that I thought was interesting at Google because I was interested in doing developer relations type work, not regular software engineering. And Google was hiring for developer relations at the time. And it caught me at a time where I applied for every single developer relations job in the San Francisco Bay Area, which at the time was only like 12 roles. And out of all the other conversations I had about DevRel, a few of them translated to offers, and I ended up going to Google. And it's worked out pretty well ever since. I quit at one point to go work at Firebase, and then Firebase got acquired, and I quickly came back into the fold. And it's been as I generally like working at smaller companies more, but as big companies go, Google has been a lot of fun. So if you want to get to Google, the things are, be in a city with a big Google office. I happen to already be in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is helpful, but Google has engineering offices all over the world. So being near an engineering office works a lot better because Google doesn't really do the remote engineering thing as much as other organizations. And apply. Yeah, that's really, there was no secret sauce or anything like that I did. I was at the time of my career where I wanted to work for a large company for a while. Okay, one day I will get there. Yes, you will. And hopefully I'm still around at the time. So if you do end up making it to Google and you encountered me on the stream before or watching this video, please do drop me a ping. I'm pretty easy to find on the internal things. Just search for Jen Tong and you'll turn me up. I'm the Caucasian Jen Tong, the only one. Just say hi to me and we'll go grab some coffee or something. It'll be tons of fun, especially if you come back to the San Francisco Bay Area for training or something. Okie doke. So on that note, I am going to call it a day. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for chatting, because the chat is what makes this stream fun. It's like coding, but social. And I am an extrovert. And yeah, thanks so much. And I hope to see you next week on my next stream. Bye, everybody.